Welcome to HCD's webinar series on the Housing Element Update. This is a 5-part series covering changes to state housing element law, basic requirements, and opportunities such as the Streamline Review. My name is Tom Brinkheis, and I will be leading you through Part 4 covering implementation plan requirements. To view the remaining parts in the series, please refer to our website at www.hcd.ca.gov/HPD. The housing element is unique as it requires specific implementation actions to carry out housing objectives. One common mistake made in the housing element is identifying a broader policy as a program action. Therefore, it is important to distinguish between goals, policies, and programs to highlight differences. A goal defines the general endpoint to reach based upon identified need. For example, reduce governmental constraints on the maintenance, improvement, and development of housing while maintaining community character. A policy is a course or method of action to guide and determine present and future decisions. For example, support the use of various incentives to offset the cost of affordable housing while ensuring that potential impacts are addressed. Programs are a specific action steps each locality will implement its policies and achieve stated goals and objectives. For example, provide fee deferrals and/or waivers for affordable housing. So what are the components of a program? A program is a specific commitment for action with an objective, a time frame that allows for beneficial impact within the planning period, and identifies the parties responsible to carry it out. Beneficial impact is a new requirement for housing element programs pursuant to SB 375. It means that a program must include a definitive date, deadline, or identified benchmarks for the program that is scheduled early enough within the planning period that a beneficial impact can be realized by the community within the planning period. It means the intended outcome from the program must be clearly defined and quantified. In other words, programs should have a greater amount of detail and specificity than in prior planning periods. All elements must contain programs that address these 6 statutory program areas. The Building Blocks website has sample programs that you can utilize in each of the areas. Adequate sites programs. Identify sites with zoning, development standards, and services that encourage and facilitate a variety of housing types. Multifamily, mobile homes, various types of farm worker housing, emergency shelters, and transitional housing. If sufficient sites are not identified in the land inventory, then the element should have a program to rezone adequate sites to meet the RHNA in total and by income group. In addition, any needed programs to facilitate a land use strategy, i.e. lot consolidation, incentives for recycling, etc., should be included. Constraints programs. Constraints programs are linked to analysis of governmental constraints and should have programs to address and remove or mitigate regulations or standards where constraints are found. Conserve and improve. These are your programs to facilitate rehabilitation on conservation of existing housing stock. This can include programs to address potential gentrification and green building. Information from the analysis of housing conditions would be useful to determine the rehabilitation needs. Promote equal housing opportunity minimum requirements. Must have a program that handles fair housing complaints, possibly by contracting with a fair housing organization. Must distribute fair housing materials throughout the jurisdiction. Preserve. Where you have at-risk programs, must have a program to monitor and take action to preserve the units. All housing elements must identify an adequate number of sites appropriately zoned to accommodate the jurisdiction's RHNA throughout the planning period. In a nutshell, you start with your RHNA and deduct any units that have been built or approved since the beginning of the projection period. Deduct the number of units that can be accommodated on sites zoned at appropriate densities. Then you deduct the number of units that can be accommodated through alternative strategies such as second units, farm worker housing, mobile homes, etc. If you still have units for lower income households remaining, there is a shortfall of appropriately zoned sites, and the element must include an adequate sites program to accommodate the shortfall. The program must accommodate 100% of the shortfall of need for lower income households, allow single-family and multifamily rental housing by right, which means no CUP, PUD, or other discretionary review. Design review is allowed as long as it does not trigger becoming a project for the purposes of CEQA. The sites identified must allow a minimum of 16 units per site, have a minimum density of either 16 or 20 units per acre, depending upon whether you are in a rural jurisdiction or not. If you are unsure if you meet the definition, contact HCD and we will help you. Accommodate a minimum of 50% of the remaining need on residentially zoned sites. These are sites that do not allow mixed uses or commercial or retail development. If you are on an 8-year planning period, SB 375 has created some specific timeframes for you to implement any required rezoning programs. If you are on a 5-year planning period, this does not apply to you. So if you are on an 8-year planning period, all rezoning requirements must be completed within 3 years after either 1, housing element adoption, or 2, 90 days after receipt of comments and findings from HCD, whichever comes first. If, at the end of the 3-year time period, the rezoning has not been completed, an extension can be requested if at least 75% of the required rezoning has been completed and the delay is due to one of 3 things: a reason beyond the local government's control, a lack of infrastructure due to fiscal constraint, or the rezoning requires a major revision to the general plan. The maximum extension that can be granted is 1 year, and there are several actions that must take place to formally request the extension. If you find yourself in this position, contact HCD as soon as you are aware so that we can help walk you through all the steps. So what happens if you don't complete the rezone on time? There are consequences. The jurisdiction can be subject to a lawsuit by any public person, and in order to compel zoning may be issued by the courts. In addition, if a housing development is proposed to be located on one of the sites identified for rezoning and it complies with applicable standards, the development request may not be disapproved, required to have a CUP, PUD, or other discretionary permit, and the jurisdiction cannot impose any condition that would render the project infeasible. The last requirement I'll talk about is quantified objectives. The element must include a quantification of anticipated outcomes based upon the jurisdiction's programs and should reflect the objectives of the programs in the element. It doesn't necessarily have to match the RHNA. The 3 categories that must be included are construction, rehabilitation, and conservation and preservation. And each income category must be quantified according to income group: extremely low income, very low income, moderate income, and above moderate income. The most common error here is forgetting the extremely low income category. For more information on this and other housing element requirements, please visit our Building Blocks website. In addition, we are here to help. If you have any questions on the content of this webinar or about the housing element update process, please contact us at 916-263-2911. Thank you for listening.